My name is Ida B. It's my professional name, and most of you over 50 would recognize me. My real name is Ida Blackburn, and I started with Koco TV in 1958. Pretty interesting story because back in 1947, I was a senior in high school in Chandler, and they brought a television sample for our assembly. And it was so mysterious back then. And they said you have to green lipstick, and they really kind of scared you about what it was going to be like. But then years later, in 1958, I heard a commercial on Channel 5. They were looking for a Romper Room teacher between the age of 21 and 28 that had a teaching certificate and had taught school to do Romper Room. Now, Romper Room was a syndicated show, and there weren't that many back then. Now, remember, this is 58. And Bert Claster in Baltimore, Maryland, and his wife had started Romper Room show in Baltimore, and it was so successful that they syndicated it, and the syndication was the script, the idea and the script. So they interviewed me and did an audition, and the guy told me, he says, well, you're gonna get it, but we have to go through the audition. So, I wasn't too, it's kind of frightening, because of the reflection from 10 years before that. But I got the only image I ever had of someone flying in an airplane was in movies. So here I go to Baltimore, Maryland for my training. First time on an airplane ever. I had a hat box, an umbrella, all my luggage, white gloves, a hat. Yeah, I was in the nines, man. And so we had to stop over in St. Louis. Then we got to Washington, D.C. Well, when I got to Washington, D.C., I had to catch a train. I've been on trains here, but that kind of commuter train I'd never been on, and never been east or north. And I'm a southern girl, and went down to the train station there at Washington, D.C. to go to Baltimore. The train was pulling out. I've never seen so many doors in my life. So I ran through the door, pushing all these accessories that I took with me, and the man down the front of the steps says, just throw all your stuff down here and hurry, they're leaving. So I ran down, he put me on, there were no seats, and I was about to pass out. I had to pushing all that stuff. So I finally, you know how we are in Oklahoma, it's all friendly. And I said, do you mind to scoot over just a little, let me sit down? And no, it won't. And I thought, oh my, I'm in Yankee land now. So anyway, I finally sat on the corner of somebody's seat. And as I said, got my training in Baltimore, Maryland, which is another big experience, but it would take too long to tell all of it. Was there for 2 weeks, came home, and the Romper Room consisted of 5 children on the set, age 5. They were all 5 years old. And my daughter, Betty, was 5 at the time, so she was my stand-in. If somebody got sick or something, I would take her, and she would be the sub. But the format called to teach the Pledge of Allegiance. We had do bees and don't bees, teaching kids how to brush their teeth, and just general really good stuff. As Romper, Bumper, Stomper, Boo, tell me, do magic, mirror, tell me today, did all my friends have fun at play? Well, I was looking through a mirror, it was just a frame. And the kids at home thought I was really talking to them. Now remember in 1958, television was really magic. And I would get letters, they would write to be on the show. It was just amazing how popular that little show was. And Mr. Coster always In those days in broadcasting, the people who owned the stations or the programmers gave people their names so they couldn't move to another station because they owned the name. And so it came to giving me my name, and I said, but my name is Ida. And all the names they chose were something easy for 5-year-olds. Miss Ann, Miss Sue, and Miss whatever. So I said, Miss Ida, can I not use that? And they said, yes, but we own Miss Ida, the name. We copyright the name, Miss Ida. And I said, that's okay. So they did, and I became Miss Ida, and was here for a year in Oklahoma City with Romper Room. And incidentally, you may not know that our first satellite studio was at Western and Britton Road. It was the old Kimberly grocery store back in the 40s, 30s, and 40s. Not very big, but we rented that, and my studio was plywood. It was probably 8 feet wide, square, and we had plywood walls, one director, one camera, one cameraman. That's it. And of course, right there, as you recall, or if you know the area, there is a railroad track there, and a train comes through all the time. So fortunately, it wasn't scheduled during my little, I think it was 9 o'clock, something in the mornings. And had that. And then finally, the reason they moved it, or the reason I left Romper Room, Channel 5 was a satellite at that time in Oklahoma City. Their main tower was in Crescent, and their offices and studio was in Enid, Oklahoma. FCC had assigned Enid. So I was using up too much of the live television time. 51% had to come from Enid. And so they were going to move to Enid, and said, will you go? And I said, no, I will not go to Enid. So Carol Arnold, who later was on KTOK, was only 18, but she very quickly took up the role as, I don't remember, it must have been Miss Carol, but it didn't last very long after that. But she did, that's how she got started in broadcasting, as follow-up of Romper Room. So because I had a contract with Bert Claster, for a year I could not do any television for a year. Well, I knew I wanted to stay in television, and I felt like television loved me and I loved television. And I'm like, what am I going to do? So I called Bob Dennis with Dennis Donuts, and I said, Bob, I'm pretty well known by all the children, and if you would hire me for your donut company for advertising and public relations, and buy me a Ford Fairlane with chrome all over it, real convertible, and put Ida Blackburn on. I couldn't use Ida B then, or Miss Ida. I couldn't use Miss Ida. So I put Ida Blackburn. And I went around to all the schools and went to one a day with donuts for the kids and apples for the teachers. And I did all kinds of promotions for a whole year with Dennis Donut. Opened 4 new donut shops. That was in 59, late 59 and early 60. After my year contract was up, I took the Ladies' Home Journal and went through the editorial page, and knew I wanted to have my own show. So everything like exercise, cooking, fashions, everything that was in the Ladies' Home Journal, I copied it. And so I took my format to Ben West at KOCO, and they had just moved to 63rd in Portland. And he looked at it and he says, well, we'll just pay you for the show. And I said, that's fine, whatever. So they gave me $100 a month to have the show. Now, I had to sell my commercials. I mean, they sold some of them, but I ended up getting 15 minutes. Probably one of the first infomercials that was made back in 1960. And I had TG&Y and Montgomery Ward, and they would come on for 15 minutes with their people and talk about selling, whatever they wanted to do. And in 1961, one of the first shows, the very first show I did, you'll find this interesting and humorous, because no one knew much about television. I mean, what do you wear? How do you do makeup? You just kind of experimented and came up with your own ideas. So I bought a red leotard. I mean, all you could see was my hands and my face, other than the red leotard, because I was doing exercises for about 15 minutes every day. And that was part of the show format. And I went on the air with that red leotard for black and white television, and guess what? I looked naked. I mean, real naked. Outlines of everything. So after the show was over, the director told me, he said, "Oh, don't ever wear that again." So I had to go to black leotard. But I think that's really funny. I love that story. And then Ben West, who was the manager then, went to California on a sales call, and he called me on the phone. Now remember, my show had to be 51% film. And what I did to attain that was I used cartoons for the kids. So it was a kind of a mama kid show. It wasn't just a woman show, it was a mama kid show. So a family show. So when he was in California selling, Jack LaLanne was interested in buying part of my show. Well, you know what? That took my cartoon plate. He bought half of my show, which was 51% of my show by the time we got the commercials in. And oh my, for a long time, Jack LaLanne was half of my show. And we would always start the show with my theme song, and I would introduce Jack LaLanne because he was an integral part of the format it was called At Home with Ida B when we first started. So that went on for a long time, and he made several personal appearances and did the shows in my studio. And he was a wonderful man. He was about 5'2", and just, of course, bounced all over the place. Helped me a lot because I had already sort of formed my exercise programs just from my modern dance class in college. I didn't know what I was doing, but it worked. Now, when I first started my At Home with Ida B in the new studio at 6030 in Portland, Phil and Helen Banta, and if you're interested in your computer nerd, they're on Google and you can read about them. But they and their partner was a bread company out of Illinois, and they bought Channel 5 for Mr. Treat from Enid. So the name of it, his company, I don't recall that. That wasn't important to me at the time. But then after, about 1962, don't hold me to these dates, but it's right in there somewhere, the Oklahoma Syndicate bought Channel 5. Now that sounds like an ominous name, but it was John Kirkpatrick, Dean McGee, Gene Everest, Kay Eddy, and Lloyd Benefield. And they were the stockholders in the Oklahoma Syndicate, and they bought Channel 5. It was the best thing that ever happened. And they made it a community station. Everything that could be done for the community. Cowboy Hall of Fame, Governor's Ball. We did everything. We had the first Cowboy Hall of Fame at the Skirvin Tower at their first meeting with Clint Eastwood and Rowdy. But anyway, that's why Channel 5 has always been a community station, because they followed through even to this day. So then after, and Mr. Kirkpatrick was the main one I went to when I needed help. And I told him, well, I kind of have to back up here a little bit, but when I first started my show in late September 1960, Mr. Gaylord, who was the publisher and owner of Lady Oklahoma, did not believe in movies. I mean, he was very against movies in his paper. And if there was a press conference that took an employee to like Utah or England, he wouldn't let him go. He wouldn't let him go. He didn't have anything in the paper. So there were 8 theater owners, and they all came to me and said, can you go on these junkets for us, because the paper won't send anybody? So that's the greatest thing. I told Christy Everett not long ago when I saw her, I said, I have to really appreciate your granddad, because it wasn't until after he died that John Denton started the Fun Guide. If you're old enough, you can remember when it first came out. It was like that size, and it was all about entertainment. But because they didn't send anybody, I was able to interview everybody and go on trips. And I was one of the first ones to do that in the nation. Don Wayne was my very first interview with a movie star, and Kirksey Nix, who was a lawyer out of McAllister, was his best friend. And Kirksey called me and he said, the dude came in for the premiere for the Alamo. Would you like to interview him? I said, oh my. Well, I was so naive and so Chickasha, Oklahoma, you know. So I went to interview, and I think it's on YouTube, I'm not sure. But I hadn't bleached my hair yet, so you wouldn't recognize me. But during the interview, I said, what do your friends call you, Mr. Wayne? And he said, well, my friends call me Duke, Ida. And I said, okay, Mr. Wayne. Yeah, it's so stupid. But anyway, he liked me, I guess. And it was the beginning of a long-time relationship. And the word mentor wasn't used back then. It's a fairly, last 50 years. But if I had a mentor, it would be John Wayne, or the Duke. Because from that interview, they invited me to come on, remember Hattori? Well, they were doing trips from Salt Lake City to Denver to Dallas, and they wanted me to fly with them in their DC-3 plane and stay with them for 5 days. Man, to me, that was wonderful. But what it did for me, it gave me an opportunity to tell the vice president of Paramount and John Wayne that they were suing television to get residuals on the John Wayne show. And I said, y'all are crazy. You shouldn't be doing that. I said, television is your sister or your cousin, your kissing cousin. I said, you need to use television instead of being angry with them. So this little old female from Oklahoma had a little bit to do with that, but I guess it must have impressed them, because they called me back after 2 weeks, and Paramount owns KTLA in Los Angeles, and they wanted me to do a show. I had named a show that I was doing then Dateline Hollywood, which is another whole story. And they wanted me to do that in Los Angeles. Well, Bob was in the 6th grade, Betty was in the 4th, and I just didn't want to take them away from Oklahoma. So I went to Mr. John Kirkpatrick, and I said, well, I'm having a little problem at Channel 5. Earl Hickerson, who was, I don't know what his title was, he was assistant and number 2 man. He didn't like me, had never liked me. And so he talked me into giving me movies to host, which was real demeaning. I mean, kind of. But I thought, they're not going to run me out of this. So I named my little segment in between old movies, Dateline Hollywood, and Hollywood started sending me all these movie stars. So it was still gonna make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. I was really good at making sow's ears. A lot of things happened at Channel 5 around my showtime, like when Kennedy died. We didn't have a news department when we first started in 1960. We had finally had Frank Doyle by himself, one person who did the news at 10 o'clock, and we had an AP teletype by the coffee shop. Well, when they shot Kennedy, I heard it ringing in the ring when there's emergency. I ran in there and saw that, and of course went running out, and then everybody knew it. Everybody's always saying, "Do you know what you were doing when Kennedy was shot?" Yeah. So, but anyway, my success really has been attained with the people I worked with. Mike Waters was a cameraman on my show. Bill Howard started out as a cameraman on my show. That people refer to him as Pokey. He had just gotten out of the Korean War, and he had been a photographer in the Army. And he came in 61, and it didn't take long. He finally became my floor manager, which is, without a good floor manager, you're dead in the water, I'm telling you. Because they keep you happy. Every morning I walk in, he says, "There comes the beautiful queen," get you ready, get you up. And that's what a lot of people don't understand about personal relationships. You need people who can keep you up. Well, Bill Howard was my greatest asset on my show. And he was with me to the end in 1975. And it's interesting to note that my show ended when Good Morning America came on the air because they took my time slot. And it was February 3rd, 1975. So if you ever want to know when that started, that's it. So anyway, Bill Thrash came. He went to school at Ada, got his degree from East Central. Very smart, very creative. He wonderful, wonderful. And he was the heartbeat of Channel 5, and then he went to 4, and then he went to OETA, and every one of them he left his big footprint that nobody can fill. And Mike Palmer was a director. First he was cameraman, then he worked up to director. But you see, we didn't have color TV. Channel 4 was the first station in the nation to get color TV. Well, we didn't have it. So all we had was black and white and no tape to begin with. So Wilson and Company wanted me to do a commercial for their sandwich meats in color. We didn't have color. So they sent me to Wichita, Kansas, to a station who had color production. And guess who I would have in the commercial with me? Jim Henson, with what his first puppets were called Skip and Scoop. And I was like standing there with the two puppets behind me talking about Wilson summer sausage. Don't have a copy of that. Wish I did. But that's long gone. But that was one of my favorite experiences. You know, I was so fortunate to go to all the world premieres that all over the world. And that was because of John Wayne and Paramount. They paid me to come to Hollywood for 2 weeks to get set up with all the major studios to be a correspondent, like a television head a hopper. And there were only 5 of us in the nation. Rex Reed and 3 others, one from Houston and a girl from Dallas. And we were the very first ones. So I was very fortunate there, and people ask me, what do you owe your success to all that time? And I said, it's because I was surviving. I had 2 kids. I had to make a living. You know, I didn't save a lot of things that would be very valuable today because it was just part of my work. It was just part of what I do. And my son is Dr. Blackburn with the Oklahoma Historical Society. And Mr. Kirkpatrick. It was so funny because when I went to him and told him John Wayne wanted me to come to Hollywood, he said, do you want to go? And I said, no, I want to raise my kids in Oklahoma. I said, I'd be dead from an overdose and they'd be minis before. This was in the 60s. So anyway, we had an opportunity to talk 20 years later, and he said, I sure am glad I didn't let you go to Los Angeles because we have the greatest historian we've ever had, with Bob. And I said, yeah, you're right there. So that's one of my big assets to my life is my son, and my daughter is a school teacher, just now retired. And they are so community service minded and creative. And one little incident I have to tell you, just simply because every family should hear this. When Bob was 16, he and Betty came to me and he said, Mom, people don't introduce us by our names. They say, this is Ida B's son. This is Ida B's daughter. And I said, son, someday I'm going to be Bob Blackburn's mother, and I'm going to be Betty Blackburn's mother. And it came to pass. Well, I was with Channel 5 with the Ida B show, and from 1958 with Romper Room till 1975. And Art Glenn, Combined Communications, owned us then in the early 70s. And they were out of Phoenix, Arizona, and Art Glenn was our manager. And in 1973, he said to me, Ida, I want you to go in sales, part-time, do your show, and then go in sales. Because they had 4 salesmen, and Al Parsons was sales manager. He didn't like the idea too good because having a woman mixed in there with his sales force, but that was the whole reason they wanted me in there, a threat. Well, I didn't get an account list, nothing. So I started with Hibdon's Tires, Carpet World, Bentley Hedges. I mean, I could go right down the list of the mom and pop stores that I cultivated and made into big stores, Epperson Photo. So ended up being the top TV salesman in the state. Gannett then owned us when I went into sales afterwards and wrote a big story on me being a female and beating out the men. And so anyway, the show ended in 75, and I had already been in sales and stayed in sales till 1985 and retired early. Well, one of the things that television has meant to me is that always figure my daddy is on the other side of that camera, and everything I say, I'm directing toward him. And that through the years, I've developed a warm relationship with all my clients and with all my, people call them fans. But I loved every minute of it and would go back and do exactly the same things again. And I thank you for the experience.